Carbohydrates, often abbreviated as CHO, is the collective name for sugars, starches and dietary fibre. Dietary fibre being particularly important in horse diets, and we've considered that previously. Carbohydrate is defined as in two ways. Structural carbohydrates, this is the fibrous fraction of the feedstuff, and non-structural carbohydrates, the sugars, the starches and the fructans, and we'll talk about all of these in more detail as we move through. And this is abbreviated to NSC. As I mentioned previously, carbohydrate is the primary energy source for horses. So let's begin by looking at structural carbohydrate. This is the component that constitutes the fibrous fraction of the plant. Structural carbohydrates, as the name suggests, have a structural role in plants. They provide strength and rigidity to the plant. This is also known as the dietary fibrous fraction of the plant. And as I've said before, this is a major energy source for horses. Thinking in more detail about the specific cell wall components, these comprise of the carbohydrates cellulose, hemicellulose, pectin. They also contain lignin, which is not a carbohydrate. I'll talk about that a bit later. And it contains some proteins, some vitamins and minerals and water as well. But let's just focus for the time being on structural carbohydrate. If you cast your mind back to previous lectures, you'll recall that dietary fibre is degraded by microbes in the large intestinal environment. And this is degraded to produce end products, predominantly volatile fatty acids and gases. And these volatile fatty acids, as you may recall, are used as an energy source for the horse. What's important to remember here is that structural carbohydrates, also known as dietary fibre, are not digested in the small intestine of the horse. The horse lacks the necessary endogenous enzymes to break these components down in the small intestine. The types of feeds that are high in fibre, so that have a high structural carbohydrate content, are grasses, hay, straw and sugar beet pulp, for example. But what we need to remember here is that fibre is extremely important in horse diets. It's a major energy source, but it's also important for maintaining a healthy large intestinal environment. If there is not enough fibre in the diet, then the large intestinal environment cannot function effectively, and this poses significant health risks to horses. I'd mentioned lignin. I'd mentioned it as being a cell wall component, but not being a carbohydrate. So that's important to remember. Lignin is a non-carbohydrate component of the cell wall. However, it is very closely associated with the carbohydrates that are present in the cell wall, the cellulose, the hemicellulose and the pectin. The very important thing to remember about lignin is that it is negatively correlated to digestibility. Lignin is very important to the plant in terms of providing strength and rigidity, but in terms of its nutritive value for the horse, lignin is resistant to breakdown by the microbes in the large intestinal environment. So the more lignin that is present in the plant, the decrease in the digestibility of the fibrous fraction, because what lignin does is, whilst itself is not digestible, it also binds around the other carbohydrates, cellulose, hemicellulose and pectin, making them less accessible to the microbes present in the large intestinal environment. So the amount of lignin that's present in a forage is the main thing that affects the nutritive value of the forage. So as the plant grows, it needs more lignin to provide the strength and rigidity, but that means it drops in its digestibility. So what that means in simple terms is as the plant matures and grows, it drops in its digestibility, or we could refer to that as dropping in its nutritive value. And many feeds that we feed to horses, for example, mature grass hay, straw, etc., are very high in lignin, hence why they have a lower nutritive value. So we can measure the amount of fibre that's present in a feedstuff, and we can begin by looking at the neutral detergent fibre content, abbreviated as NDF. And this measures the total cell wall component of the plant. That gives us an indication of the total amount of fibre that's present in the plant. But we can also drill it down a little bit, and we can measure the acid detergent fibre content, abbreviated as ADF, and that measures specifically the cellulose and the lignin that's present in the plant. So NDF measures hemicellulose, measures cellulose, it measures lignin. It doesn't include pectin, but it gives you an overall estimate of the total cell wall component. And then when we look at ADF, that's specifically looking at cellulose and lignin. So what that means is when we look at fibrous feeds that have a high ADF value, over 40% for example, that would indicate that that particular feedstuff had a lower potential fibre digestibility, and so therefore potentially of lower nutritive value for the horse.